track 7, we have Beyond Ransomware, Winning the War on Data Exfiltration. We have the Chief Revenue Officer at BlackFrog, Mr. John Sarantakes.
You can do better than that, right? Thank you. Attention whore on stage. I'll let you know right now. Robert Hanlon postulates that we shouldn't attribute to malice that which can be explained by stupidity. And for the people at this conference, for the people in this room, for myself, we deal with that spectrum on a daily basis. The questionable, the suspect, the nefarious, the criminal, which we think ultimately means that ransomware is an existential crisis. It's a crisis of existence because when it's your data, when it's your company's data, everything's at risk. Financially, reputationally. Just last week, I don't know if anybody read this, the state of Maryland announced that their Department of Transportation had a significant breach by a little outfit known as Riceta. And if you don't know Riceta, they've had over 100 ransomware attacks in the last year. Maybe you've heard of the one right before state of Maryland at SeaTac, Seattle-Tacoma International Airport, or maybe you heard of the one at the Children's Hospital of Chicago, attacking big institutions, demanding significant revenue for the data that they take. And we can sit here and talk about whether you pay ransomware or not, whether that's the right strategy to approach. The benefit of BlackFrog is we believe in stopping the data from leaving the device, anti-data exfiltration, before it happens. If the data doesn't leave the device, it's not breached, it's not encrypted, it's not stolen, it's not held hostage, and it's not in somebody else's hands doing what they don't know with. State of Maryland, there's a lady that works there, nice lady. She's in their Department of Transportation, and now all of her personal data is all over the dark web and the web being sold for a ransom of $3.8 million. And it's not just her social security number and her birth date and her passport and her ID card and every other form that they had on file for her. It's 10,000 of her closest friends that she works with, right? That's on the dark web for ransom that somebody can access. And that to us is an existential crisis because it may just be her and we don't know her, and it may impact her the rest of her life. What happens when it happens to your organization, to your team members, to your leadership? There's an existential crisis in the fact that this is a significant issue that we need to pay better attention to. Before I get too far into this presentation today, I want to remind you that we are here presenting and we have a booth, 611. You'll see the fancy black shadow, our logo backlit. It's a phenomenal booth. It's got free socks, especially for the people that listen to this 45-minute session. So everybody here in your fancy corporate sneakers with the white bottoms, go get your Black Panther socks from BlackFrog. And if you have other interest or understanding of what we want to do, realize that we also take research and making sure that people are aware of what's going on in the ransomware space or the anti-data exfiltration space very seriously. We post ransomware reports on a monthly, quarterly, and yearly basis. We work with the likes of IBM and other threat security actors that are out there in the world to make sure that we align on the data. We're sharing the same types of data so that everybody understands the threat that is out there. And that is all available on our website. We are seeing an increase in ransomware, and while we look at the number of disclosed at 562, it might be reasonable to say it was only 562 agencies. Our concern is more about what's not disclosed. We know that most organizations do not want the reputational impact of disclosing what's happening with their data on the dark web, the light web, wherever it may be. But the reality is this is something that's only increasing. We're seeing an increase in attacks, an increase in threat vectors, and an increase in threat agents, which I'll talk a little bit more about here in a minute. This is not going away, and we have not solved it. The benefit for BlackFrog is our whole purpose is to stop this data from leaving the device and then letting you know. We're not sitting here analyzing your data. We don't care what kind of data you have. Structured, unstructured, classified, unclassified, it doesn't matter to us because we don't look at the data. We look at the activity. We use our algorithms and machine learning to identify what's happened in the past and what we predict is going to happen in the future to stop the data from leaving that device. And once we do that, we'll let your SOC team, your NOC team know and they can make a decision or determination of that was a viable threat. Or, no, our finance team normally communicates with Moldova all of our sensitive financial documents, so we should have let that go. If that's the case, we'll adapt our system and let it go going forward. But we're going to stop it first because it meets all the thresholds and criteria that we look at to identify threats in the environment. Some of these companies you may have heard of. My goal today is to give you a little bit of background on the landscape, what we see as the potential threat, and then how we attack that threat, right? My goal is for you to walk out of here with a complete understanding of who we are, what we do, and why we do it, and you get a free pair of socks at our booth. Marks and Spencer's, huge retail outfit over in, certainly in the United Kingdom, but also throughout Europe, were breached. You may have read this in the news a couple months ago. They're approaching $400 million in remediation for this breach. It's a significant cost for a big entity. And we all might say, well, they have the money, they can afford it. Nobody can afford $400 million because this was not budgeted, this was not aligned for or accounted for. This is a big deal for them, not the least of which is it took them down, closed their stores, took things off shelves, affected their supply chains. It was a big impact to their organization. That's retail, and we'll talk a little bit more about retail here because we're seeing a lot more, we're seeing an uptick in retail is what I should say, but that doesn't mean other industries are safe. Obviously, UNFI, supply chains, we're seeing a lot of upstream and downstream concerns because maybe it's not you. Maybe your defense posture is sound, your defense in-depth strategy is solid, but maybe it's your partners that are your weakness. We were having some conversations with a company that I can't announce, but you'll recognize them because they're big in the French fry market. And they told us that their biggest issue was all of their downstream suppliers. How do they protect against ransomware attacks, data infiltrations, data attacks from them? And it was interesting to me because they've got potatoes on lockdown. They have the ability to tell you how to grow a potato, when to grow a potato, how to cut a potato, how to transfer a potato, how to get it to their location so that they can serve those potatoes as French fries, but they're struggling managing their downstream suppliers from a security standpoint. Healthcare, I just mentioned the Children's Hospital of Chicago with Riceta, media breaches. More importantly, what these mean for us is we're caught in the crosshairs. Ransomware incidents increased 58% in Q2 from Q1. We're seeing more and more of this activity. We're seeing more and more of these nefarious actors coming up. And some of you people on this might recognize some of the logos on the screen here and be like, hey, I'm a big Chanel person. I wear a lot of Louis Vuitton. I have a Cartier. It's not just luxury brands that are being attacked. They're obviously an ideal target, right? They have money. Ransomware agents are trying to profit from the fact that they have the ability to pay off a ransomware attack. But more importantly, this is happening, like I just mentioned, at Marks and Spencer's. And they have grocery chains all across the United Kingdom, right? It's happened at Jaguar Land Rover, which is owned by Tata, right? So we're seeing it all over the place. As I mentioned, we talked about supply chain. I won't cover that again. I think what's important here to note is that really no industry is safe from this. We track this on a quarterly basis, and we track along with IBM to understand what industries are being hit the most in the recent 3- and 6-month periods. But healthcare, services, and government, from a disclosed perspective, have been very hot as of late. They seem to be ideal targets. There's a lot of relevant information, and unfortunately, there's a lot of security lapses, right? I'm not here to say that black fog is the end-all be-all. I know that we stop 99% of any data that leaves a device when it shouldn't. But I do not believe that in a defense in-depth strategy, you should not employ other solutions, whether it's EDR, geofencing, antivirus, whatever it is that works for you and your organization. It's just like your home. You probably just don't have one lock on your front door, no other doors or windows with locks and no alarm and everything else. You do a lot to protect your home. Fire alarms, carbon monoxide, front and back door, window alarms, cameras, whatever it may be. We think your defense posture should be the same. There's a whole bunch of solutions out there, but there's nobody who does ADX. Why do I know that? Because we created the space, we pioneered the category, and we developed this solution. And then you see the undisclosed. Again, the trend is whatever we know about, whatever you see in the news, we have access and we know through our threat intelligence organization that it's worse on the dark web, it's worse out there when we're not told what's going on. And that's kind of typical for where we live right now in our society, but the reality is it's a huge problem, and we just don't know as much about it. So we're trying to get the word out, make sure everybody understands what we do, how we do, and why we do it, because there's a benefit to every organization in the world to enhance their security posture. There is no end game in the security space. You're always learning, you're always getting better. And then from a global threat, as you would expect, the United States is a big target. The United Kingdom's a big target. There's some other countries at the top of the list, but we've seen threats in over 120 countries. We're tracking threats right now in Pakistan and the Philippines, and we see them all over the world, and it's important for us to track that because what we identify is what's coming, right? What we like to say and what we build into our 29 algorithms with our machine learning is that if we see it in Pakistan, we know that that effect will make its way to larger countries where the risk-reward scenario is just much greater. So it's happening all around us, and it's only growing, and we don't hear about most of it because a lot of it happens outside the United States. Who's behind the attacks? I mentioned Riceta earlier. This may appeal to some of you very security conscious people in the room to understand who these people are. I'm sure you've read about Scattered Spider and what they've been doing in the insurance industry. We've seen a lot of government warnings issued for Warlock and for Interlock, especially in third world countries. Certainly, Kira and Qlin dominate. Like I mentioned, Riceta's had over 100 attacks in the last, I would say, 14 months, if I remember correctly, and not small entities. It doesn't mean small entities are safe, right? Any data is valuable in the hands of these nefarious actors if they can make money off of it. And that's whether or not they sell it on the dark web or get you to pay ransomware or just have your data in their hands, right? Again, what's important to us is to ensure that there's never a data breach, because if there is no breach, your data is secure, right? It hasn't left your environment, it's not being held hostage, it's not encrypted. One of the things we're seeing as well from an encryption standpoint is it used to be the model was steal your data, encrypt it, hold it hostage so you'll pay, and then they'll decrypt it. So the question is, what happens while it's out of your hands? Do they really decrypt it for just you, or do they hold on to a copy as well? We don't believe in decryption because at that point, the data's already left the device or the organization, and it's already in somebody else's hands, right? We do a lot of, like I said, threat intelligence research and analysis. You can find that on our webpage where we talk about individual threat actors, what they're doing, how they're doing it, ways to avoid or mitigate, or what to look for to see if you see this in your environment. So feel free to take a look at blackfog.com and you'll see all this information at your leisure. And you can also stop by our booth 611 to get your free socks, and John or Scott or myself will talk to you about what we do in depth. I think it's important to note that what we look for are the 4 pillars of threat intelligence. Real-time visibility. What is going on? How's it going on? Why is it going on? We do continuous analysis. We're always looking and researching, especially the dark web. We're using our language models in our console, and what you see here is a picture of our console. It's a very secure platform that manages our entire ecosystem for this tool. But we're constantly looking at the threat actors on the dark web and monitoring what they're doing, because that's what we build into our algorithms going forward to identify what we should be looking for on behalf of our clients and personnel. We provide deep protection insights and then focused intelligence. We really do have a great threat intelligence team with years of law enforcement, years of security, network security, that help our clients understand what's going on in their environment. Because half the battle is stopping the data from leaving. Then it's how do we ensure they don't come in again, right? We think of it like this. We assume you're going to be breached. We assume somebody's going to break into your house. The question is, can we stop them before they leave, right? That's what we do. We stop them before they leave. But we want to be able to tell you what we saw, why they did it, how we stopped them, so that you can build defense and a perimeter that doesn't allow them to break in the next time, right? That's an important component of what we do. We've seen the rise of extortion and data exfiltration. You can see I mentioned a minute ago, we're evolving from encryption to just straight up, let me take your data hostage and you pay us for it. We're seeing the increase in the cost of a data breach. Just as a point of emphasis in here, by a show of hands, who has in their defense budget or the security budget $5.5 million for remediation efforts? Anybody want to put their hand up? I usually don't get very many hands for this because most people aren't thinking about the remediation effort. They're spending so much time and energy trying to focus on stopping the nefarious intent, and we understand that. But the reality is you'll see in one of these slides in a minute, City of Columbus, I guess it was about 1.5 years ago now, had a breach. And they went back and they proposed to their city council that they get an additional $7 million for their budget so they could deal with the remediation. They had to notify all the people that were affected. They had to buy new equipment. They had to buy new software. They had to hire more lawyers. There was a lot they had to do. They ended up approving $23 million in remediation for what we anticipate is a breach that could have been stopped for about $250,000. It's a significant amount of money, and in the city of Columbus's standpoint, that's taxpayer money, so that's our money, right? That's being used to mitigate this threat, which at this point in time they have to do because their data has been compromised. They want to make sure it doesn't happen again, but you don't have to be there. Whether it's $5 million, $23 million, $300 million, MGM, 3 years ago, $100 million spent on remediation, MGM casinos. Like, it's a significant amount of money, and along with that money comes reputation, it comes shareholder value, it becomes people's jobs at an executive level because there was a breach, whether or not they could have stopped it or not, and why didn't we do better, so let's hire a whole new security team. So we feel like you should avoid that altogether by stopping the data from leaving the device with anti-data exfiltration. We've seen this increase to 95% data exfiltration is an all-time high. Last year, IBM said it was 94%. This year, they're saying through the first half, it's already 95%. Every breach is looking at your data, right? Whether they're stealing or not, what they're doing with it, again, at that point is beyond, that's not what we're concerned with. What we're concerned with is how do we stop it before it leaves your device? How do we sever that handshake at the packet level so the data does not exfiltrate the machine? Why do they do it? I think we all understand the magnitude of the monetary approach that these organizations think that they can get. And there's a big question out there. How many people pay ransomware? We don't really have good data on who pays and who doesn't. We see some that are paid, some that aren't. But I couldn't sit here and tell you it's 50-50, 60-40, whatever it may be. The reality is that it's encouraging more of these nefarious outfits to continue breaking into organizations, stealing their data so that they can have the attempt. Like I said, Riceta, 100 attempts in the last year. I think they're averaging $1.1 million in their ransomware requests. We know that they have about 40% success rate. That's $40 million off those 100 companies that they've gone to. Now, what does the state of Maryland do with it? Who knows? They probably won't pay the ransomware, but the problem is the damage is done. And that's what I think we're trying to do from a security standpoint, along with everybody in this room, is build a defense posture that ensures that we don't have to deal with that on the back end. We stopped it before it happened. Widespread vulnerabilities, low risk of prosecution. These organizations are all throughout the world. I think you might have heard that there were, with the Scattered Spider instance, there were some teens that were involved to start off as a game thing on some Discord servers and advance to very nefarious data extraction across these organizations, and it causes significant harm. And then there's the FUD aspect. If you're not a salesperson in this room, FUD stands for fear, uncertainty, and doubt. Because once they have your data, what do? What do they have access to? What are they going to do with it? How do I protect my people, my organization? And then there's also the component of targeting essential services, right? How do we get access to the waterworks, to the dam, to the electricity compound? There's a lot of different things that these nefarious actors can do, and a lot of things that they can do that may make you think hard and long about, should I pay this ransomware? I can't have them having access to my water supply. Switching from the landscape, I want to talk a little bit about AI. And I'm sure that you're all excited because at every presentation today and every booth you go to, people are going to talk about artificial intelligence and how they use it and how they've mastered it. I'm going to do the same. I don't know that we've mastered it, but we use machine learning in our 29 algorithms that help us identify activities that have happened so they don't happen again and what we predict is going to happen going forward. We have our own language model that supports our enterprise console so that our clients can use that to better understand what they're seeing in their space and protect against it. But it's affecting a lot of what we're running into. From a social engineering standpoint, you're going to see here in a minute that there's a lot of AI being employed against us. So that means that firms like myself and other security firms have to use AI to kind of defend against it. What does that look like? 1 in 6 data breaches are AI-driven attacks, whether it's deep fakes, malicious chat bots, phishing schemes, social engineering. We're seeing a ton of effort to use AI to throw the scent off, to identify new ways to break in, or to find successful patterns that have worked in the past, they reuse them again. These people aren't the smartest in the world when it comes to that. If they find something that works, they'll use it until somebody stops it from working, right? And that's what myself and other organizations are all trying to do, is trying to stop the exfiltration of your data by these known entities with known patterns, but also predict what those patterns might look like going forward. This is a significant thing. We were dealing with a client a couple weeks ago that did not have black fog. And in 1 week span, they had a phishing attack that cost them a couple $100,000 just by passing passwords and phone information over the phone, right? Password information over the phone. So nobody's going to stop that. Back to Hanlon's razor, right? Malicious or stupid, right? If somebody's sharing passwords and everything, all that information over the phone, there's not a whole bunch we can do. We can train, we can encourage people not to do that, we can encourage to hang up and call back, validate the bank. There's a lot of things you could do, but if somebody just shares the information, there's no software in the world that's going to stop you from talking to somebody on the other line. But in that same week, they also had an employee download 3 terabytes of data, company IP. The employee was leaving, they got it out of the system, and they left with it. Now, the good thing is they were able to recover it. We were able to help them with that. But the problem is it already happened. And this is a firm that is very concerned about their reputation. This word cannot get out, right? So it's one of those things where there's a lot going on. If we can stop data from leaving your device, that's one less thing you have to worry about, right? And the reality is you probably still worry about it because at the end of the day, threat actors are getting better at what they're doing. We're getting better at blocking them. There's more competition coming up in our space to help block them. But at the end of the day, as you can see here, a lot of different approaches and tactics are being used to compromise and get access to your data. You can see here that when a breach is identified by an organization first, it's usually the most cost-effective manner, meaning when your security team can identify it before it gets brought to your attention, there's a significant cost savings there. But the reality is, I'm not a big fan of the slide because at the end of the day, you're still out, right? You still have a breach, whether you identified it or somebody else told you about it, and it's still going to cost you significant money that you haven't allocated for or budgeted for, and you're going to have to deal with that. Again, our goal is to stop data before it leaves the device so you're not in this scenario, right? Stop data before it leaves the device so I can let you know, hey, here's a questionable activity. Back to our Moldova example. Do you really want your financial information going to servers in Moldova? If that's where you run your financial business from, then great. We'll allow it to go forward going forward. The true price of data loss is significant. We've talked about a few of them here. I want to focus on operational disruption because this is significant. How many people in this room work for a company that deals with other companies on a daily basis? Show of hands. Most of them go up, right? And we rely on those relationships and those partnerships for us to be successful in our business endeavors, but we also rely on them to have their security in order so that they're not an entry point for your organization for nefarious actors. The downstream, the upstream supply chains that we deal with on a regular basis are important because that is proven to be an entry point that people are coming after all the time. The second thing on this slide is the secondary attacks. Unfortunately, but very much like life, if somebody's vulnerable once, they're likely to be vulnerable again. And so a lot of attack vectors focus on people that have already been breached to go after them again in a new and a different way, right? Because the assumption is they don't have the security protocols in place, they do not have the defense posture in place that's going to protect them, so we'll keep going at them until we prove that we can't get through. Any number of these other things, data theft exposures and reputation damage, they're all things that just add to the overall malaise that is within this environment. It's not just ransomware. It's not just, do I pay somebody $3.8 million? There's so much more to it, and I think we all understand the nuance of that. So, why black fog? Like, what are we doing that is different? We feel like cyber criminals have figured out ways to bypass traditional solutions. Doesn't mean traditional solutions aren't important. I think everybody should have an EDR. I think everybody should be focused on antivirus, email, server domain, registrations, and monitoring and analysis. There's a lot of things we should be doing. I just think that ADX should be something else we're thinking about. The last line of defense, OSI layer 3, that allows us to ensure that if somebody does get in, they don't get out, because that's what ultimately we're trying to accomplish here. Data is the ultimate prize. It's the only thing these organizations care about because they feel like they can hold it over our heads to pay them or do something with it to make money off of it. Next generation solutions go beyond antivirus and XDR and EDR. to focus on data exfiltration. That's why we created this company. It's why we focus purely on this one platform in the defense posture. Truly a Shift L technology that is focused on the outbound, making sure that we sever that handshake and those packets don't leave the device. We think prevention outweighs response. We think that the cost of response is significant and only growing, and I hope that I've gotten that point across through a couple of the slides and talking points here today. But if we're in that scenario, your data is already compromised, it's already out there, and you have no idea what's being done with it, regardless of what you're told is being done with it or how it's being used. We have real-world examples, again, our website, advertised from our website. Feel free to take a look at this information. Don't just trust John on the stage, even though he's giving you free socks. Make sure that you go take a look at this. Investigate this for yourself. This is real data, and it's free. It's all on our website. We also know, according to IBM, that AI, using artificial intelligence in your solutions, in your defensive solutions, does reduce the cost for organizations significantly. A little over $2 million, if I can read that slide correctly. I think it's 5.52 to 3.62. And that just means utilizing artificial intelligence, in our case, machine learning and language models in our console, helps us to reduce the cost if somebody were to be breached. We have not been breached. I can't say we're 100% effective, but I can tell you we're 99.9% effective. Nobody should be able to tell you they're 100%. This is out of IBM's report highlighting the importance of adopting AI-driven solutions. I mentioned that a little bit earlier. It's important to note that we are also cooperating with them, trying to understand what they're seeing, because it only impacts and helps us deliver a solution for our clients. Our approach effectively blocks the activation and spread of cyber attacks, targeting multiple parts of the kill chain. We utilize artificial intelligence to identify user-centric behaviors, and then we focus on data restrictions, the ability to use including privileged users and administrators. We have the ability to set up groups. We can do everything that you would expect a software solution to be able to do within your organization, supporting the different levels of access, the different hierarchy that you may have in your organization. We certainly understand that. Our goal is to make sure this is something that sits on the endpoint, and it is an endpoint-driven solution. That does not impact the day-to-day of everybody who's using it, unless they're a nefarious actor trying to get access to your data, and then we stop it. I mentioned our machine learning-based algorithms. We've been doing that for years now. I mentioned our language model and our enterprise console. I would encourage, if you're interested, we do free assessments and demos. Love to take you into the console. It's where the secret sauce is made. We do not do a whole bunch of presentation on it. We do not integrate with seams. We keep it a very secure solution. We don't have an API to it. We try to limit the access to our console to just our clients for the benefit of them without putting ourselves in harm's way by opening it up through APIs and everything else. And then we have a dynamic rule set that is constantly changing. We're learning daily what these entities are doing. We want to make sure we can share that with our clients so that they benefit from what we've learned over time. As I mentioned, we are an outbound Shift L solution. We focus on being the last point of security that the packet header or the packet sees before it leaves the device. Once it leaves the device, it's gone. As I mentioned, we want to sever that handshake before it happens, but a lot of times we see different threat actors break into the machine or break into the system through any number of methods, and our job is to catch it on the back end. We sever the handshake before it leaves the device. And we do that because we focus on the network level of the OSI. If you're familiar with the OSI layer, level 3, focusing on packets and network headers so that we can stop there. We're also integrated into other levels of this as well, but the one we like to focus on is a layer 3 because, again, that talks about being the last layer of defense. And then us versus traditional solutions, right? Everybody's got a limited budget for what they can spend on their cybersecurity efforts. There's a lot of different tools in this space. It's a very crowded space. There's not a very crowded space for anti-data exfiltration. We know because we pioneered it, we created it, we developed for this one reason. But we do see a lot of competition out there. Again, we would recommend a layered approach, a defense in-depth strategy that employs a lot of different solutions to make sure that your data is protected, that your organization is secure, and we think that is an ever evolving component to your defense in-depth strategy, right? You're not going to figure it out today and have it for tomorrow. We got to keep getting better over time. We believe in a prevention strategy. Again, if we stop the data from leaving the device, you have not been breached. Your data is not encrypted, you're not held hostage, there's nothing being done with your data, we've stopped it, right? That's a win for us. One for the good guys, I should say. And then enhanced DLP. A lot of people say, oh, you're like data leakage protection. We're like data leakage protections on steroids. Like I said, I don't care about the data. We don't care about classified or structured data. We don't look at the data. We don't spend any time with the data. We look at the activities, and we run that against our algorithms to see who's done this in the past, who do we predict is going to do this in the future to make sure that it doesn't happen again. With that, I want to close out with yeah, I think I said that a minute ago. Cybersecurity is a continuous process, not a destination. It's something we're learning from every day and getting better from every day. Multi-layered approach is important. All vectors must be considered. Encryption is no longer the go-to method. I know that's been popular over the last couple of years, but if you're decrypting, your data is already out there and you don't know what's happening with it. And 95% of attacks all use data exfiltration. Also with that, like I said, booth 611, Black Fog. Pretty fancy backdrop. We've got Black Shadow, our Panther, all lit up. For everybody in the room, feel free to stop and get some Black Panther socks. I think you'll like them. They're phenomenal. But there's also a lot of other resources you can use if you don't feel like going into the convention center. Feel free to hit our website. We're an agent-based solution. We have an agent for everything that's out there. Soon to be a new agent that'll be on the screen. I can't talk about it yet, but we have a specific Mac agent. Right? We are so focused on security at the level, at the endpoint, that we felt it was important to have a Mac-specific agent. So we have that. We have iOS, Android, Chrome, Windows, all the way back to Windows 7. So we go way back. But feel free to take a look at our website. With that, this is our contact information. I appreciate your time and attention. And if there's any questions, I'll do the best I can to answer them. Thank you very much.